So welcome back to Night Flight. James True is back. We announced it that we will not wait very long for our next interview. I'm very happy that he is here. He's the author of The Spell of the Six Dragons, Blueprints of Mind Control. His website is jtrue.com. If you're interested in his bio, please visit his website, jtrue.com, because it is long. There is a lot on this bio. So James, welcome.
Hi, welcome. It's nice to be here. Good to see you again.
Yeah, hi James. So thank you so much for coming and for doing the subject with me. I thought that you would be the perfect guy to talk about this.
Yeah, because when anyone says narcissism, people instantly think of me.
Yeah, okay. So for the audience, we are not talking about your regular self-absorbed guy or girl. That's not what we are talking about. And yes, there is a lot of signs and traits out there. Some have listed 51 traits, and but we will keep it simple here because narcissists come in all shades and colors, and we will just, yeah, we keep it simple. What you will always find, be it a covert, an overt narcissist, is the 3 E's: lack of empathy, exploitation, entitlement. Yes, narcissists think they are entitled to do whatever they want to do, and you have to be happy with that. So, what say you, James?
What was the the second E? I like those: empathy, entitlement, yeah, exploitation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely think that nails it. That's actually the best I've heard it. And there are certainly degrees of this problem. I think a big misconception is that narcissism is someone who's full of themselves. I actually think it's the exact opposite. Someone has a vortex of self. They are in a vacuum state that they're unable to pull out of. It's like a tailspin, and the tailspin causes the desperate behavior. Much like a fish, when you pull a fish out of the water and onto the dock, it would be flapping around, gasping for what we call air, but what, you know, to it is water. It would be gasping for oxygen. It would turn into basically a narcissist, if you were to follow the analogy on up into what's actually happening with the human psyche. It's a very specific, very particular problem, and it's diagnosed as being backwards from what it really is. It's a vortex, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not, when you said full of them, in reality, they are pretty weak and full of fear.
Mm-hmm.
They are constantly, yeah, in their head, and the stories that they are telling themselves, they are not capable of filtering out fact from fiction. You know what I mean? And the world is always out to get them.
Mm-hmm.
And you become the enemy because you are part of this world. You know what I mean?
Yes. Again, back to the fish analogy. Everyone around him who is not water is the enemy. Everyone who is not his freedom to move his gills in such a way where he can pick up oxygen is going to appear to be the enemy. Additionally, it's really kind of twisted, but when you call a narcissist, you're even making it worse, because you're making them think that they're wrong for wanting oxygen, for wanting water, for wanting life force. This is a threat, a deep threat to their system. You know, parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems are two very different snakes that are competing in our body. And our limbic system is going to sense threat one way, but our rational mind is going to assess a threat another way. The narcissist appears to be overtly selfish because the narcissist is overtly wounded. They have a walking wound. That's what makes them weak. They are in a state of trauma and shock. And that is allowing the bypass of any kind of social agreements to be violated. That's why they exploit a human. They don't see other humans. All they see is their own danger. This exact same thing happens on the battlefield. It happens in trauma. It happens during a freak accident. It happens during a fire. People enter into a limbic reptilian state of mind when their system is trying to shut down auxiliary systems, to harness and focus their energy as much as possible. Empathy, because it's in the mammalian brain, it's our secondary brain, or this more not secondary, but more of a super brain. And that shock has, just as your shock would cause you to excavate your fingers and your toes, and that would show up as shivering or whiteness. The same thing happens with our ego. Let me phrase ego, meaning ego is a good, healthy thing here. As your psychic body it becomes in a state of threat so desperately where it shuts down these outer symptoms. That's where the exploitation comes from. And also the entitlement comes from. If you are in the back of a line at a clinic and you can't breathe, you have a choking, we're going to feel entitled to step immediately to the front of the line and say, I don't care that you have a fungus on your toe. I need help right now. So all these symptoms are synonymous with a bleeding, a psychic kind of bleeding, a sort of a sucking chest wound that we can't see. Because we've been blinded to what I've been calling the prana economy. I don't want to get us off track, but it really is this underlying economy that we have with each other of energy. And the narcissist is someone that has suffered a massive deficit from that a long time ago and is walking through the village desperately doing whatever it can to, again, release itself from the dock and return to the water, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. So I have found at least 3, be it coaches, psychologists, therapists, that are saying the narcissist is becoming the new normal and we all need a good wake-up call. And the ramifications of that are disturbing.
Yeah, they've been disturbing. I would even call that isn't even saying it's becoming. It's been that, at least in American history, the Native Americans called this Wetiko. They called this something. This was a cannibalism, a psychic cannibalism, although Wetiko is more seen as a moral cannibalism. But if you actually look at what's happening, if you imagine that the narcissist is suffering from a gaping chest wound, they are cannibalizing themselves and anyone around them in a desperate attempt to stop the bleeding. This system has been introduced through dissonance. It's been bred just as you would put something in a greenhouse to make it grow. You would cover it in plastic to make it die. This is narcissism is a festering wound that is developed. It is a crop. It is bred inside of a civilization, which causes the cannibalism to create the desperation, which opens up the door for poor decisions for the Hegelian dialectic. That's why we're constantly looking for a savior, because we've literally been placed into a position of needing a savior. And we're denying each other what this even means. Look at what Freud did to the ego. Look at how, it's literally, you're telling people that are on the dock flopping for water And we as the intellectual academic community, not even we as in me, because I'm not, they would never call me one of them, but the academic community is walking on the dock saying, how selfish of you to want water. How insane is it of you fish to sit here and complain about water all the time? You guys have a fetish and love for water. They're teaching the exact opposite of what it is that's happening. And we're believing them. Why are we believing them? Because this is how you fund a chemical trance. This is how you farm and create a chemical trance. This state of desperation is contagious. When one narcissist goes out, it's very much like a vampire. They will cause another sucking chest wound in someone else. And that is a spurious event that spreads much like any modern disease would today. These are vibrations of the psyche that are employed, much like a horror movie or a sitcom or a book or a cult leader or a politic or a global movement. All of these are the exact same thing. These are psychic vampires that are attaching onto our belief system and causing us to turn to much like a Medusa, where we're materializing ourselves into a vacuous state where nothing exists anymore except for this tangible, strange stone world. And that's where psychopaths do well. That's where sociopaths do well. That's where narcissists actually learn to function and survive. This is the virtue shaming, signaling culture that we see all around us. You know, it's the exact same manifestation of that. When virtue becomes the honey instead of virtue, instead of like true self-sufficiency or sovereignty, when we replace all those things with this virtue economy that we have, this idea that who points out how much humanity sucks the most is the person that's elevated now, which again creates that vortex. It creates the feeding economy where narcissists can make a profit from being narcissistic. That's what's happening. This is 100% engineered, like without a shadow of a doubt, I think.
Mm. You touched on something that is very important, and that was the point that it is shame-based.
Yes.
Let's say you grow up in an environment where it was not really allowed to make mistakes, or where you were overindulged. If you got the trophy, you scored the goals, but you were underindulged if in some shape or form you were not delivering, you know. Mm-hmm. And I guess it starts from there. So, but for the empath out there, because I know I have a lot of viewers that are empaths, what that means, if they become the majority, then the hunt is on for the empath. The hunt for the last empath in my area, because they need somebody to listen. They need an audience. They need to feed of your emotions. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and if that source, because that is what you are, you can never be in a relationship with a narcissist. You are a fuel source.
Yes.
It becomes a transaction.
Yes, you were supply.
Yeah, exactly. And so if there are fewer and fewer left, I mean, we are going to have fun.
Well, the good news is, and I don't mean good news in a good way, but the good news towards running out of empaths is that for every narcissist you create, you also have to create an empath. Those two are synonymous with each other in how the creation process happens. I don't mean to sound like I'm just plugging my book, but but in Blueprints of Mind Control, I actually really covered this a lot. It's the idea of the golden child versus the scapegoat. And really what narcissism comes, okay, so first of all, I'm not saying that only golden childs can be narcissists. However, most of the population, when we recognize someone as a narcissist, we're recognizing a golden child abuse victim. And those victims can only be created through the contrast with a scapegoat of some kind. Now, that scapegoat doesn't always have to be a sibling. However, almost all of the cases, you will see that same pattern. You've got a golden child that emerges from the nuclear family, and so does the scapegoat. And out of the scapegoat is the Loki archetype, and the golden child is the Thor. These naturally play off each other in such a way where you end up creating someone who's very, very empathic. This is the person, the Loki, the scapegoat, who, because they are left to their own devices so much, because they're abandoned so much, they have no choice but to develop the feelers, the sensory, extrasensory perception to determine what someone else may or may not be feeling, thinking, or processing chemically. So you end up breeding an empath by breeding a golden child. And you can only give the golden child a pedestal by having another pupil nearby that is not on the pedestal. In other words, you need something to not keep elevated so that you can show what is elevated. Just as if you're going to throw the scapegoat into the basement, you would need another pupil that is not sent to the basement to really emphasize to the scapegoat that they are in fact ignored and denied. So these two magics create each other. They create themselves. And part of why I don't talk about narcissism a lot is because I have come to the conclusion that the scapegoat empath is also suffering from narcissism. It is the opposite side of the coin of that vortex. And it's something that still creates a codependent relationship, but more importantly, because I'm not saying codependency is necessarily bad. What I mean by this is it's a fetishized version of codependency on both sides. The narcissist is codependent on the supply. The supply is codependent on the vampire. When you feel worthless, when you feel self-abandoned, a victim will feel alive when a predator responds to them as fuel. It sounds so twisted, but the victim feels like they have worth because the predator is feeding off them. They derive a special kind of energy that they can't get anywhere else. That energy is reinforcing their feeling of worthlessness, but at the same time, giving them a purpose in life. It's the narcissist is telling the wolf, and not to bash on wolves, but the wolf is telling the rabbit, I own you. Therefore, the rabbit feels that someone finds value in him. He is worthy of being owned in some kind of a way. When you have a culture that's surrounded by dissonance, this kind of energy is hard to find. And the scapegoat will flock to it and feed, just like the narcissist will flock to the blood in the water and feed off that. These are the same energy. It's the same relationship, really.
So you are not afraid that the empath is a dying breed?
No. It's, if anything, the moment that the empath starts to fade is the same moment that the narcissist starts to fade, and people become more integrated. What we call empath is really someone who's trying to, typically when someone calls themselves an empath, there's someone who's, their prana economy is actually trying to say, I have been a scapegoat. I am gifted in my skills at handling my scapegoatness. I have learned to prosper as an abuse victim. That's really what saying you're an empath really is. You have both sides of this is the same energy. Both sides of this vortex have their apex points, their points of the most the sharpest that you can be on that side. And one would be someone who's telepathic, and the other side would be someone who's psychopathic. Both of these are complete opposite spectrums of perfection. Do you see what I'm saying? Even though it's a flaw, even though it's, an unhealthy relationship has developed and caused this brewing of a personality to enter a certain state, it can be perfected in the psychopath and the telepath. And it's if you look at it like cooking, it's really fascinating, because this is how you bring the cinnamon and the spice this is how you bring the the flavors to the kitchen, meaning the world, like our psychic thing. So I wouldn't even call narcissism unnatural. I would call it systematically weaponized, is what I would call it. Below the weaponization of it, below the psychopathic aspects of what this causes on a mass global scale from an economy standpoint, or from a religious standpoint, or from a psychological standpoint, there is an opening up of trauma in both the narcissist and the empath that leads to an eventual salvation, self-realization, self-growth. There is a function to this dysfunction. This dysfunction will cause us to grow as people, but we're doing it in front of each other. We are literally taking our clothes off in public and showing our ass to each other in an effort to grow. But some of us have learned to really profit from that, and have found like an eddy in the stream where they can hide and sort of stay. But that happens on both sides. Your empaths and your narcissists both have those same things. A lot of narcissist hunters out there, there are YouTube channels of people that are like, how to detect a narcissist. Those people running those channels are sometimes really, really narcissists, like really strong narcissistic personalities. So there's always a profit and loss statement with any kind of energy transfer. And as long as there's a profit and loss, you're going to see people trying to do that on both sides, on the narcissist side versus on the empath side. So it's the same coin.
Hmm. Yeah, it would be a little bit bitter, even for the narcissists, if there were no empath anymore. Because
they would starve.
Yeah, exactly. Because then you are in for the cage fights.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that they can't feed on each other. It's not possible. No audience, nobody's listening. Yeah, they will start finishing off each other.
Yep. The true cause of narcissists is what I call blind empathy. And it's actually from normal, healthy humans. Okay, so Greta Thunberg is an example of this. On the outside, it would appear to be very empathically profitable to sympathize with her and to help champion her agenda. She's a young, bright-eyed, although really bright-eyed, girl with a strong future. She sailed across and all the trigger points are there. All the check marks are made to say this is a good virtue. This is what I mean by the prana economy. This is a good virtue purchase for me. I'm going to share this photo of Greta and give her a thumbs up. I'm going to talk about her at the grocery store or at church this Sunday. The economy of that is that you will gain virtue by showing that you yourself are sensitive about the environment and that you are aware of the dangers of climate, and that you empathize and sympathize with the children of our future, like Greta. These are blind empathy free donuts. Like you can pick these donuts up at any public place by simply going along with that agenda, adopting that narrative. That is blind empathy. You've done no research, or you haven't looked deep enough. You're not giving true empathy. You're looking at the economy. You're looking at the transaction of adopting this position, and you're seeing this position will gain me favor in front of my crew, in front of my tribe, in front of my community. You will blindly go along with that to gain the profit of that virtue right away. The person that comes out and says, I think that she's full of crap, is going to suffer not a profit, but a loss in prana. That will cost them energy. It may cost them energy 3 months down the line when you said it at church, for example, and 3 months later you're not picked for the bake sale, or whatever. You're not going to know. You're not going to see that energy take place. It's the blind empathy equation that the modern working man is forced to adopt, because we don't have our own sovereignty, where we're constantly just looking for what's the cheap, quick virtue that I can get. How can I get ahead? How can I stay ahead in society? That causes blind empathy. And it's that blind empathy is what truly is the cause of narcissism. It is our ability to check out of our decisions about where we distribute our prana that is really what's causing the psychopathy, the sociopathy, the narcissism to fester and grow. If we were more frugal with our belief system and with our virtue economy, with who we support, if we were more frugal with that and more constitutional when it came to defending that, have zero narcissism. The problem would be gone forever. So if I'm blaming anyone right now, Judith, it's probably the normal average person who would never say that they are narcissistic. I'm blaming them because they are the ones that are creating this vortex of ignorance where blind empathy can be hijacked. Literally, your empathy is hijacked by someone and is used against you in your favor. But the calories it would take for you to put into that brain power to figure that out is not worth the transaction to you. So you just simply let it go. It's no different than saying, hey, every time you leave a tip on the table for your waiter, 5% of that could go to a psychopath. And you're still giving the tip anyway. We are paying. In other words, we're doing good to pay empathy to people that need it. This is why it works. We are sleeping better at night, as we should, because we are tipping a waiter for whatever. But at the same time, we are in a system where we are paying for psychopathy. We are paying for the greenhouse and the electricity and the water, the irrigation system, and even a security guard to guard the psychopathic greenhouse so that these people can grow and fester. That's, to me, is what our deeper problem is. It's our delegation of empathy. We've delegated it to the news. We've delegated it to the church. We've delegated it to our own thought leaders. We're not willing to, I'm not saying all of us, but so many of us are just not willing to put in the time it takes to really find out the truth. And how can we when we have a centralized media? AP and Reuters are the only two news sources that really intrinsically exist. Therefore, everything that they say would have to constantly be fought against just so you could carve a space in the zeitgeist of people to even bring up a new subject. So I'm not saying this to bash humans. This is a natural function of the dissonance. This is all a feature. All of these, narcissism is a feature of elite psychopathy. Narcissism is a very important, vital creation that was inserted, for this very reason, to have a good profit statement at the end of every quarter.
Mm. Other people would tell you now, you know what, that sounds nice, but actually my life was almost completely destroyed by a narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you solve that?
I don't like to compare where we've been,
Mm-hmm.
but holy geez, if you read my first book, you see a journey where I was in the teeth of the dragon. In fact, one of the chapters is called Dragonus Narcissus, and it is me staring directly in the teeth of this beast. It was, I am still recovering from that, energetically, financially, physically, spiritually. I am still recovering from that experience. I still can't fully forgive what I allowed myself to engage in. The shame that I feel is about how willfully vulnerable and self-destructive I was to get that deep in with narcissism, to become that. And it's only after looking at my own perils of empathy, at my own scapegoat syndrome versus golden child. It's only by looking at that truth that I just gave about what to really understand narcissism is to understand there's two separate sides here. That to me, it's the hardest thing I've ever had to learn. And I'm still learning it. And I if it sounds like I'm making excuses for narcissists, that's not what I'm saying at all. I want to fix this. I want to fix it. And I see other kids going through this and fighting this system right now, but no one's telling them, hey, here's what's really happening. Really, this prana economy that's happening, and there's this blind empathy is the cause of this. It's abuse. And I know we don't want to look at an abuser, a narcissist, as having been abused. But I'm telling you, I've been married to a golden child, malignant narcissist. It is a deep abuse they go through, and it's so deep that they are willing to do things to me that I talked about in my first book that just really show just how deep they can be hurt, just how deep they can go into the whole system. And the entire time, you get lost in the victimhood of your own self-destruction. You get lost in your own responsibilities of, I chose to enter the dragon's cave. I chose to become the princess kept by the dragon, just as you choose to become the knight that gets vanquished by the fire as you try and save that same princess. These are all the exact same dynamic of the exact same vortex that happens. And the vortex is a sucking chest wound that you literally feel in your solar plexus. I think most of the people that suffer from weight problems today actually suffer from an evacuation in their solar plexus, the energy center right here. And because it's just above our belly, we mistake it for hunger. We're taught to think that this is hunger. It's why we're tuned into this 3 meals a day sort of mentality. We're taught to think that, oh, well, it's just all about food. It's all about this or it's all about that. When what's really happening is that we are masking this installed sucking chest wound that was given to us when we were very young through dissonance, through lies, and most importantly, through self-abandonment. So to really understand the pain of an empath is to truly understand what self-abandonment really means. And when you fully look at what self-abandonment means, you're going to have to pull up a deep core shame that developed in just how much you abandon yourself. There's a deep shame that most people maybe don't even tap into. They see that shame as, I'm angry at the narcissist, but the pain is much deeper. It's much more internal. It's that shame of, how could I have done this to myself? Like, what a mean thing I did to myself. by staying in this relationship or by engaging in this transaction, you know?
Yeah. I guess, yeah, you're right. When you come out of that and to face the music that you had an active part in that it could even happen. That is one of the hardest things to do.
I think it's one of the things most people don't do. Like they might tertiarily say that, but until that deep shame starts buckling up through your body, like you would feel it somatically. This just, it's like that. It's like of just, what did I let happen? It's when that comes up, then somatically you have accepted. So much of this is a somatic experience. So much of overcoming the perils of narcissism on either side of this is going to be a somatic experience that you have, where you start to unlock what it is you did to yourself. And some of those things that you did to yourself, you were 7 years old. And so it's really hard for you to go, well, how could I do that to myself when I'm 7? But you have to, because if you want to gain sovereignty, if you want to depossess from this, depossess meaning that narcissism is a possession. It is a vortex possession. If you're going to find sovereignty from that and break that blind empathy addiction, it's only going to happen when you somatically remember what it felt like before that happened and during it. That's when you really start to clear those gates. I remember, all this heat pouring out of the top of my head one day when I was walking, and all I'd done is I looked up the traits of, I Googled, what are the traits of self-abandonment? It was something I'd read something, and I looked that up, and as I was walking, this weird somatic experience happened. It wasn't a realization, it was a somatization. It was a somatic understanding of something, like opening a door in your house that's been there the entire time, the entire time, and it's full of Christmas presents that you forgot that someone gave you, and here they are. And some of them are like really rotten and smell awful right now because you left them in there too long. But you're unlocking yourself. It's the most important thing you could do, I think. And it's not going to happen on a couch. It's not going to happen in a therapist's office unless there's some serious somatic work involved in the process.
Would you say that having healthy boundaries would help both parties? Because one of the preferred tools, or two of the preferred tools that the narcissist uses is gaslighting and ghosting, and this constant push, pull, and that, no, don't have time for you. Busy. And when the truth of the matter is that if I were to send you an email that says, you know what, we meet at Friday, 8 p.m. in a hotel lobby, and the reason why we meet there is I will give you $2 million in a briefcase, or you would be able to rearrange your schedule. So what it boils down to in that scenario is worth. Yeah. And if you are in that push pull, and you do not get a lot of input, you're being breadcrumbed. Yeah, just enough to tear you along. You know what I mean? So would setting up healthy boundaries, would that help?
Yeah, it's all about the boundaries. Let's back up for 1 second though. It's not that you were being breadcrumbed. It's that you were accepting breadcrumbs as enough of an exchange.
Mm-hmm.
You were like, oh, okay, that's enough. Therefore, I will pay you now in prana. It's a pranic transaction.
Mm.
So boundaries are, obviously the narcissist is going, just like my book talked about, there's the crook and the flail, the two tools of mind control. The crook is a gentle hook, a shepherd's hook, and it's a comforting someone with like a hug. Oh, you poor thing, you poor empath, come here. Only I understand you. That's what the narcissist would do. It's using the crook.
Mm.
And then the flail is an actual whip on a stick. It's how dare you, how dare you of all people betray me. It is an elevation of someone else's betrayal. It's a shame venom. It's a spit in the face of a really stingy venom that really burns. And when your face is really burning, that crook feels really good. If they are to then use the crook on you, it's, if you've accepted that transaction, that crook is going to feel really good to you, and you're going to enter into a slavery, master slave scenario. Keep in mind, this is a perfect example of what I mean by both of these are the same thing. A slave is required for someone to feel like a master. A master is required for someone to feel like a slave. You cannot be a slave of one. You cannot be the only person in the world going, I'm a slave. Like it doesn't even make sense. Nor can you be the master, the only person, and say, I command all these people. Like there's no one there to command. These words don't exist without. And the master slave truly is the vortex that I'm talking about. It's what the vortex would physically look like. Part of releasing the shame, I think, is understanding that slavery is natural, and that masochism and sadism, because slavery is natural, I know this sounds really weird, but because it's natural, sadism and masochism are healthy coping mechanisms to a natural system. If you go back to Roman times, half of that culture ran on slavery. It was set up to be a slave culture. When American settlers came over to America, many of them would ask, they would come to a house, knock on the door, the house owner would answer, and they would say, hey, it's freaking cold. Can I be your slave? Can we please enter into a relationship where I will be your slave now? And that was a transaction that both parties participate in. There's no such thing as a slave who doesn't voluntarily move his feet somewhere. If you're going to send your slaves out to pick cotton, they are physically going to pick cotton. You're not required to move their feet and then take their finger and then move their finger. Like, they are using their own volition. They are participating in the ritual of picking cotton. Just as the same slavery culture existed in Rome, where I would participate by raising my master's own children to make sure that they are smart, intelligent, witty, strong, able to defend themselves, so that they are prosperous. Why? So they can have more slaves later. And then if you look at Jesus, render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. He's supporting the slavery system. Some may say, no, he wasn't. But now let's look at Romans 13, where it starts to even declare the sanctity and holiness of a government and of listening to a government and obeying their orders. So slavery is, in a lot of ways, training wheels. It's a necessary progression. When a baby learns to stand on its and take its first steps, it's going to crawl for a while. When it crawls, it's going to be clinging to couches or shins or the pull of dresses or kneecaps or ankles. It's going to use whatever is around it. It's happy to enter into a slave relationship too, as long as it can get what it wants and hopefully evolve to a point. Some of us choose not to evolve. to standing up and taking our own steps. I would say most of us don't choose that. Most of us are much happier staying a slave in some way to the state, or to even a religion. They're just happier that way, or to their wife, or to their husband, or to their boss, or to their community. Slavery is very much a standard operating procedure for most of society. And I wouldn't call that necessarily unnatural. I would say that the slavery aspect of it is actually, again, it's a codependent relationship, isn't it? There are two people involved in that. And both sides have their upsides and both sides have their downsides. The golden child is abused. I know it doesn't seem like it, but the golden child is abused just as much as the scapegoat. I know that that's hard for people to believe, but it's because it's hard to believe is exactly why the system works. It's exactly why the empath will feel completely abandoned and annihilated when someone tries to show sympathy for the golden child. It's the exact same way on the other end. It's this system is designed. There is a rose and a thorn. Both are extremely important to the lifeblood of that plant. Both the thorn and the petals make it survive. Both of those things contribute to its beauty. Both of those contribute to the fact that the rose is the most powerful archetype that there is. This is the paintings of God, you know. He's going to have these amazing, it's a fractal. So you're going to have this golden child scapegoat. You're going to have this male female. You're going to have this sun moon. It's another way that we have these dynamics really stretching us apart.
Mm. What would you tell somebody that says, no, slavery is not natural, and one reason why it is not natural is it's a very unhealthy relationship?
You would have to be ignoring a lot of history where slavery was, Rome is, not to go back to Rome, but this was a slavery economy, which means that one gain their freedom and become a citizen by serving a certain amount of time as a slave. The indentured servants of America, who would agree to be a slave for, say, 7 years, would leave with a supposedly a pretty hefty salary and provisions. Most of them were leaving with a skill, like a blacksmith slave would actually leave. It would be part of his duty, part of the obligation of the blacksmith would be to train him. And one of the ways that you would train a blacksmith is, well, no, you're going to have to make your own, excuse me, I'm not a blacksmith, but you're going to have to make your own tools. You're going to have to make your own forge. You're going to have to make your own hammer. It's the point is that part of the process of growing up, same with shoeing of horses or whatever, it's you were learning the skill that you were enslaved to. If these weren't, think about it, if these weren't symbiotic relationships, people wouldn't be participating in them. And many weren't. The Seminole tribe in Florida, the southern tip of Florida in America, 30% of those Native American tribe were black. They were slave, quote, quote, slave product that said, I'm not participating. It was just simply, look, I'm not playing this stupid game. I'm gonna live off the land. And we are now Seminoles that do that. The Cherokee tribe, the exact same thing. I believe 30% of them were actually white. These are people that are like, no, I'm not buying into this crazy system of a queen and colonies. This is insane. I just simply live here, and we want to survive through the winter. So I trade with these people. Slavery is a contract. It is you don't see the slavery that we see doesn't involve a chain around the neck and someone constantly whipping them. That would require the master to be spending all of his time physically making the slave do something. There's no, why not just do it yourself? I mean, it would just be so much more efficient. So the idea that slavery is forced is really a lie. Slavery is manipulated. Slavery is sold slavery is, but that's what our entire economy is. Our entire income economy is the selling of slavery. How much are you going to sell your time to be inside of this shackle, in which you get to say, I'm just doing my job, where you get to become an amoral person and simply follow the rules of others. This is that blind empathy I was talking about before. We enter into a system where we are delegating our own sense of responsibility, sovereignty, and empathy because it's just our job. This is the slavery of the satanic system, which is a much bigger problem, in my opinion, than actual, well, I'm not going to say it's a bigger problem than narcissism, but it really does show the satanic corporate system that we have truly does show that slavery is not dead. All it's done is refined itself. You know, we are sharecroppers for our time right now. Our time is owned by someone else and it's bequeathed to us if we perform in a certain way. That's really the system that we have now. But unless we see a picture of some kind of shackle around our neck, we're going to deny everyone's the empathy they deserve, which is to say, yeah, you're living in slavery, just like I am too. You know, I can't occupy the land that I'm on right now, Judith, to talk to you without paying a tax every day to someone just to occupy this land, just to be here and just exist. Every day that is a percentage of money. It's not even like I even get to pick what I'm paying. I have to produce fiat dollars in a certain amount at a certain time in a certain way. That's as slavery as you can possibly get. That's actually more coercive than Roman slavery, if you think about it, because in Roman slavery, you were banished. That's all. You know, and banishing, I'm not saying it's like a walk in the park, but at least then you still can say you have your sovereignty, you know.
Yeah, I remember the other day on Twitter you said something along the lines of, under mind control you will believe that America has abandoned slavery. And when you were talking about this, I thought, yeah, to have real slaves in the sense that they are living under your roof, you have to house them, they need something to wear, they need food. So whether you like it or not, you have to invest in them. And so they told us a story that we are all free now. And now we can go and fight over the low-paid jobs and can pay for everything ourselves.
Yep.
But we're still slaves.
And what does the codependent do to the narcissist but pay for everything, support everything, find ways to fund everything, you know?
Exploitation.
I live in a very meager income, and well, I shouldn't even go into that, but it's not even about, if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, it's every opportunity is how can I get water? How can I extract water from this person that's willing to come up to me as I'm on the dock and say, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? You'd make me feel important if I could help, you know. There's so many lies. There's just so many that I don't know how to say this. Like, it doesn't matter if people think this sounds arrogant or whatever, but it's like, I don't think other people put as much thought into this stuff as I do. I'm not saying everybody, but I'm just saying that, like, overall, there's like a lot of people that don't, because they're busy. They have families, or they have a big job, or they're preoccupied with something else. And I think if anything, it'd be great if I could show people just how bad it really is. Like, I don't mean that to sound negative, but it's like, if people really understood just how much dissonance we truly carry every day. I mean, the problem is we've gotten used to it. We've had our whole lives to carry it. And I think only a few of us has really been able to truly step back far enough to say, look, this doesn't just feel like a bag of concrete. This is like the concrete truck. Like this is so much weight that you can't even fathom that you could carry that much of it. The price of the dissonance, the price of the empathy jacking, of the manipulated slavery, and more importantly of the worst problem, the blind empathy, the cellmates trying to gain favor with the warden by calling out you're complaining about it. Like that's the cannibalization. That's the cannibalization of the system is a natural reaction to just how bad it is, just how twisted and bad it is. So the narcissism we're seeing that's growing as an epidemic, it's really, that's the least of our problems. There's a much deeper dissonance that is so strong now that it's a full-time job to not even keep up, if that makes sense. Like if you were to spend all of your time just trying to deal with the conveyor belt of all the bullshit that's coming in, you wouldn't have enough time. So you can't even start on your own. What do you want to put on the conveyor? What is actually happening outside in the world? There's not even enough time to really look at it and analyze it.
In your personal experience with narcissists, did you at one point go no contact?
Oh yeah. I still am. Yeah, that's the only kind of magic. In fact, the most powerful magic that you can do to somebody, like a narcissist, truly the most powerful thing you can do is, if you've decided that no contact is important, which is that's a egoic boundary, sovereignty trick. It's very important. In fact, you should do that trivially sometimes, just to practice. You should really say, that person at the coffee shop, I did not like the vibe of that person. And that should be enough, really. Like that's enough for you to say, I am egoically placing a boundary there, just to practice, to feel, because you're instantly going to feel guilty. If you're a true empath, you're guilt when you start to place a boundary up. You're going to feel like you were cheating the world by being selfish, by not focusing on what it is that they are feeling. It's just a natural chemical feed. You are chemically being fed to do that. So to go no contact is pretty hard. It's like going cold turkey on alcohol if you're an alcoholic or whatever. So when you, if you can bring yourself to truly go no contact, that's really the only place you're ever going to find any power. And the spell, the most magical spell you can do against a narcissist is to, let's say that they wrote you a letter and you've already closed, like, you guys have already resolved and closed your situation, and this is their last word. By reading their last word, you are participating in the situation and you are feeding them. You are actually giving them the last bit of energy that you have. You are giving them energy on the last word. You're giving them that last word. To save that note, but never to read it, is a Schrodinger's cat kind of a situation. It's you don't know what it says, and it is a very empowering spell because it's telling you that regardless of what it says, your boundaries are worth more to you than what could be inside of that envelope. That envelope could say, oh my God, James, I'm so sorry. You're like the best person ever. I really lost you in something really special. And even though I had an affair 3 months into my marriage, it's really you that I truly love. Well, like it could say that, it could say that. But by me purposely casting it in a boundary where I will never open it, I've really gained power that I never could have gained in any other way as the codependent, as the person that's in that weak state. I actually transmute that into more power than I've ever had with them. And I think that's an embodiment of no contact. That's like a real laser lightsaber almost of no contact, is to find situations like those and really jump on them if you're trying to heal. I'm not saying that this is a license to ignore people, but again, if you're an empath, you already don't do that. So empaths should understand what I'm saying right on. They should totally get what I'm saying, because you're already a person that's addicted to what it is that they may say or think or feel, because you were constantly in a trauma fetish relationship with being understood. Understood is something that we just need to survive, but the scapegoat is purposely denied being understood in a very dissonant way. This is the gaslighting that happens, where you desperately want to be understood so bad that it has become a fetish. Just like if you were to be on an island and all you could do is drink your urine, you would probably develop a fetish for water after you came off that island. You would have this unhealthy relationship with something that you need to survive. And what caused that unhealthy relationship was the trauma that you went through as you were enduring going without something that anyone should be expected to have in a normal, healthy relationship.
Yeah, there is such a thing like trauma bonding.
Oh, the entire world has that. Yeah. We are absolutely trauma bonded. All of us, every one of us, it's, I posted today, voting is an act of denial. Change my mind. And no one can. That is a trauma bond. Voting would be like, you don't have to imagine a psychopath that bombed 7 countries and is turning around going, hey, who wants healthcare? Who wants healthcare? It's the trauma bond. The Stockholm syndrome is hearing the bank robber who kidnapped you ask you if you want ice cream. You are trauma bonded to them when you say yes, when you feed into that, even by saying no. This is what people don't understand. Even by saying no, you are feeding into that relationship. You are acknowledging their energy. You are accepting it as, this is the energy that I'm willing to take first. No contact is a deep, difficult. It's as difficult as it is powerful to invoke, because most of us don't feel like it's okay to go no contact on someone. In fact, a really big exercise that I highly recommend for empaths, and I don't even know how you would do this unless you were to come see me, because it's how do you explain this to someone and then be able to practice it, because you kind of blew it by explaining it. But anyway, here's how it works. Someone would come see me who's suffering from this empath fetish. I would behold them. We would have a moment, but I would say nothing, and they would fill the air with, because they're an empath, they're going to feel. Eventually, they're going to say something like, "Oh, it's nice to be here," or "It's good to see you," or "Hey, James, I saw your last podcast and you did a great job." Like, I'm just saying, this is what an empath would say. And it is, the longer I wait, the longer I am just beholding them, the more baggage. They don't even know this, but they're literally dropping bags off their cart every 7 seconds. Like, every time they say something, what's really happening, the prana economy underneath all this, is that they're dropping baggage and they're saying, wow, James, I don't need, like, they're going to slowly realize, I can't say this to them. They're going to slowly realize, wow, James, I don't need your words to feel tall. I don't need your words to feel comfortable. This is really uncomfortable right now, James, because you're not saying anything, but I don't need your words to find that self-satisfaction. What's happening is they are physically rebuilding their egoic border in my presence. And I'm allowing them to do that by not becoming a master. I am not the master going, here's some gruel, slave. I am not a master by saying, hey, you want some ice cream? I am simply in the room with them. I'm expecting nothing from them. This includes their obedience. This is what Jesus was doing when he washed someone's feet. If you imagined you as someone coming in that you didn't know that well and washing your feet, it would be a very egoically moving experience. Like psychically, your energy would really go through a massive change. At first you would feel awkward. And at first you would feel very uncomfortable, but that would make you feel vulnerable too. And vulnerable is the transmutation for change. What I think would happen is that washing of the feet would make you see how much you've abandoned your own body, your own. Why? Because people don't normally wash their own feet. It's not a ritual that they participate in. Now someone's going to say, well, I get pedicure every week. So I'm sorry, you get to trump me on that. But my point really stays here is that it's putting you in a state where you're like, wow, I never thought about giving my feet so much love and respect, so much sovereignty, so much attention, so much. I never thought that my feet were worthy of someone else's focus out of their day. And by doing that, you're put into this really strange, awkward position where you are now competing. This is so cool. You are now competing with someone else to treat yourself acceptably, to treat yourself well. When my mom comes to visit my house, and it's been a while, my house gets so clean. It's like such a gift that I do that for her because I'm preparing for her. But after she leaves for weeks, I'm like a completely different person. I'm glowing from how clean my freaking house is. It's the exact same thing. I'm neglecting. It's true. I'm neglecting myself, and I only see that when my mother comes, because then it's like, well, why would I do this for my mom but not myself? Like, I live here all the time. I spend 24/7 here. Why am I not worthy of washing my feet, but my mother is? It's like why is that worth the way it is? And I think that transaction in your head to unblock you, to unlock you. And again, notice that in all this conversation, the narcissist isn't even in the room with us right now. Like, we're just talking purely about how I feel about my own ego, about my own boundaries, about my own worthiness and sovereignty. It's such a powerful, powerful spell. And this really does relate to no contact. It's beyond no contact. It's a self-contact, beyond no contact is self-contact. If we were to have like a meme that was to flash up right now, it would be that, or a meme, it would be the next level of how to heal ourselves from this situation.
There might be situations where you cannot fully go no contact. Maybe it's your boss, maybe you have a shared custody, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So usually they try to feed off our emotions, yeah? And so what do you think? Is that a good method? Sometimes, let's say you have had your divorce already, the court papers are signed and everything is okay, and they still try, let's say, to make you jealous. Oh, there's this woman on Facebook and she wants to see me, and because I have such a wonderful energy and she wants to have a part of that energy, and he goes on and on and on. It could be a woman as well, it doesn't matter. And then you're listening to all of that, and then you say, interesting. And then gray stone. No emotional reaction. You do not get triggered.
I think now maybe I'm just a neophyte, like maybe I'm just a red belt, so I don't have the black belt skills. But I don't think that, in my mind, that's never going to be possible in a long-term way. Like, Once the vampire, once you've been bitten by a particular vampire, that vampire is forever kryptonite to you.
Yeah.
I don't think that, now I could be wrong. I mean, of course I could be wrong. I'm wrong all the time, but that's just how I see it. I think that one particular vampire is always going to be deadly to you until they are gone. And yes, there are definite situations where they will not go away. There are definite situations. It could be a family member is a good example of that. You know, someone in your family could be that very same role for you. And that is a no-win situation. You are going to, I think the best thing you could do is understand you are going to bleed around that person for the rest of your life. I know it sounds nihilistic, but I don't care. It's you're going to bleed around that person. It doesn't mean any other narcissist is going to make you bleed, but that one particular one, there is, again, this was a codependent, symbiotic relationship that chemically, this is important, it chemically fed you in ways that you will never be fed again. I am only attracted in a deeply chemical way to a certain type of woman that chemically triggers my own relationship with narcissism. It's no different than a heroin addict is not going to be able to take heroin and expect that to go well, no matter how much healing they've done. And as they go around going, oh, well, I have this energy drink. It's the same thing. It's not the same thing. You know, methadone's not the same thing. These things aren't the same thing. If they were the same thing, there wouldn't be a problem. These are not the same thing. And a lot of times in my mind, I could be wrong, but I'm under the impression that a healthy relationship, the reason why I haven't had a healthy relationship in a while is because I'm not attracted to healthy relationships. Okay. And that someone might come along that has all the chemistry for a healthy relationship, and I will dismiss that as knowing, well, this is not, like it's a bona fide thing. I'm noticing like I really have a struggle with this. Why? Because I part of me wants that behind the dumpster, deep shooting up crack in my arm or whatever kind of thing that I've been brought up to lust after, because it's a fetish, because I developed a fetish through trauma for gaslighting. And so when I meet someone else, they're not gaslighting me, and I will dismiss that as saying, well, that's not love. It doesn't feel like love to me. I mean, these are the excuses that I will say over time. This is why it's so crucial for an empath to fully understand their own diagnosis. The empath is not the good guy in this situation. The empath is not the person that needed to be rescued. This is a much deeper trauma here. This is a, look, dude, there's a giant halberd sword in your chest, and we can't just pull it out. Like, your spleen has grown around this thing. You are this is a part of who you are now, and we could pull it out, but there's always going to be a giant hole where a halberd used to be, that everything else grew around it. It's much similar to like a tree in bonsai. If a tree is split from a lightning, but it was still surviving, both of those, one branch is now two, and those two branches now have an independent life. We need to stop pretending that we can heal that. That tree's not healing. It's now a two-pronged tree. It's there's no healing or not healing involved. It simply is the fact of, no, this tree now has two parts, and each of them are growing independently. There could be an opportunity where the two of them fuse back together somehow, but that will never be, it's never going to look like what it looked like below the split. It's never going to be that way. That's not what it is. I don't think that I will ever heal truly from the stuff that I went through. The dissonance is permanent. That's why epigenetic trauma is such a profitable business. We can pass this stuff down to our children because we're not able to fully resolve and heal. When we die with a fetish, we are dying with a demonic possession. I know it sounds weird, but we're dying with a demonic possession of psychic intent, psychic will. You want something so bad that it creates a vibration in your DNA, and it gets passed down to your kids. Alcoholism's been proven to be epigenetic. So many addictions have been proven to be epigenetic. That's why I think these are closer to possessions, closer to programs, software programs that are run in our head. Addiction is like a software program. I want sugar. 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 It's a running program, a loop. It's an endless loop. And until you can expunge that, until you can necromance that, you're going to be forever holding that in your aura. That's why the Bible had so many verses about Jesus as a necromancer. Like, Judith, it's like crazy. There's like over 24 verses that are about, yeah, and Jesus went in and said, hey, demons, get the fuck out. Or, and Jesus went in and touched her knee and say, no more demons here. I believe that someone was tapping into this technology of addiction, which is the same technology of possession, which is the same technology of narcissism, vampirism, psychopathy, and is able to disassociate the person from their fetish. That's really important. Right now, we're taught to identify with our fetish. Like, you're taught to say, well, I know that I am an alcoholic. What you're literally doing is saying, I identify with my fetish addiction to alcohol, when what we want is the opposite. We want someone to disassociate long enough from that possession. And when you can disassociate from it, it's going to like pull its suckers off your face like an alien. Like, it's going to pull it off long enough where you can disassociate and that possession can go away. Until we understand this prana economy, this underlying energy that's happening, I don't think that we're going to be making any strides in healing anytime soon, especially not with pharmaceuticals. Holy shit.
There you have another type of demon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about throwing gas on a fire. It's insane just how bad that is. It's not even really gas as much as it's more like, talk about putting up a perimeter fence that will not allow any fire department in to a fire. That's what the pharmaceuticals are doing. It's literally putting a, don't look here, sign around. Burns. It's so bad what we're doing.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention briefly that for some people, what I described, the stonewalling, yeah, it worked wonders. And here's why. You might be right as well. I'm not in the camp of either you are right and I am wrong or the other way around. I firmly believe that different opinions can exist side by side. Yeah. So, but here's why it worked. The narc doesn't get his fix or her fix. Yeah. You start starving them. When you start starving them and they can't figure out how to trigger you, you become boring to them. And because you are so boring, congratulations. The narc will let you off the hook for now. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. I agree completely with that.
And so, and the beauty of this thing is that the narc will think it was his or her idea because you are so boring that they let you off the hook.
Yep. That's it will always be their idea. It's the only way that the world can function. And yeah, I agree with that completely. If you're deep in that codependency, it's going to be really hard. A good friend of mine just wrote me actually saying, hey, James, can you read this letter that I'm going to send my narc that was a no contact letter? And she's a really powerful magi in her own way. But because she was dealing with this narc, I could see just how much power she was losing every other sentence that she was typing. She was giving the narc way too many sentences, first of all. It was like, why give him 3 paragraphs? He doesn't deserve that, you know? It's, you need to be as tasteless as you can. This is what the playing dead is, the concept of playing dead for prey. The bear will stop attacking if you play dead. It's weird, but it works. You know, the narc is obviously the same way because it's the possession. Typically, a narc is a normal person that has a possession that comes to the surface when it sees a willing transaction, a willing prana economy between it and its prey. That's why narcs are so hard to see, because one minute they can be completely normal, or you'll think that they're completely normal, and the next they erupt and they come out. If you see more narcs than the average person, probably means that you're offering a prana economy that invites them to show their teeth. It's just something to think about, you know, to really look at and say, is there some truth to this? It's also why a lot of people that go through the truthing process of narcissism will obsess about it for a while as they get better, which is normal and healthy. I support that. But while they obsess about it, a bunch of narcs will come by and start to do that to them. In fact, I had one where a girl, she was so bad at it. I think I was comparing her to my ex, but she was just so bad at gaslighting that it was just, I've never seen something so obvious. She came over and read from the Velveteen Rabbit and pretended like she was pretending to show me, oh, well, here's my precious heart when I was 9 that I would never show anyone else, but I'm going to show you this now, right after I teased you sexually. And then told, like, it's just this weird kind of like dance, almost like you're in Vegas and someone's doing a table dance where they're pretending to rub up against you, and you're like, okay, look, I just want to eat this macaroni and cheese and maybe like, it's just like, I don't even want to, what are you doing? Like, it's just, I would imagine that those were my boundaries fully up, and I was just able to see that. But my point is that when I was obsessing about narcissism, it was pretty hard. You know, just researching, reading is all I could about it, going to 2 different therapists, really seeing bullshit out of therapy too, actually, by the way, during all that. It's when you really start to see the anatomy of narcissism, the actual mechanics of how it works and how we enter into these states of narcissism, myself included, where we find ourselves in that chemical vortex, again, where it's fight or flight, feed or be, or starve or be eaten, you know, wolf or rabbit, you know, sheep or farmer, that kind of thing. So.
Because it is such a parasitic transaction, I try to avoid the word relationship. They remind me a little bit of the archons. And personally, I'm not surprised that we have something in 3D that is an equivalent of that.
Wait, that is or isn't equivalent of that?
That is.
Well, you know, I talk a lot about software, about demons being software, a demon possession being a software. And I would think that if an archon is anything, it's a repository for a software repository for an element or a dimensional element of essence, of direction. In other words, when you start to understand that feelings are vectors, like that feelings are just different directions that you can follow. You can follow a train of thought. You can follow a vector of feeling. And that by pursuing ourselves down certain vectors of feelings, we find hallways, nooks, and crannies, tangents inside of those vectors that either feed us or starve us. Some of us will spend our entire lives down one central hallway, just exploring that one hallway or that one floor of feelings. Others are much more detached, where they can run to all different floors and explore things from all different chemical kind of positions or frameworks. This is what Carlos Castaneda meant when he talked about the assemblage point. Where is the needle on your record? Where is your focus point? Like a satellite dish, you know, is a parabola dish, and then it's focused in the center, and that center is either a mirror, like in a telescope, or a collector, or, well, a collector is the word for it. In radio telescope, it would be a collector too. Where we choose to place our collector is really the function of who we are. And the archons are basically the parabola dish that we collect from. So some of us may collect from the red archon, a Muladhara archon, an archon of sex, an archon of survival, an archon of primal lymphic response. You know, the lizard will eat its child if the child wanders too close in front of it, and it's just happens, you know. It's just like, whoops, I just ate you, you know. There's no whoops, it's just, yeah, that just happened. That's an archon. You can be possessed by that archon by having that focus in the way. So imagine your 33 vertebrae, and each of them are like a combination lock that's steered, that's turned to a different formula for each one. So these vertebrae, aligned in a certain way, would unlock a certain formula chemically through our archons, through our energy, that would then harness or transmute ether into that one form. An alpha male would have a very particular tune to their spine. A beta male would have something different. A gamma male would even have a very, very different form. These are typically the inventors, the people that are looking outside the box to do something different. So, you know, if you consider that demon literally just means divine inspiration, then it means that all of life, all of our thoughts, all of the trance possessions that we choose to go under every day of our lives. A trance is when you're eating breakfast. A trance is when you're playing piano. A trance is when you're doing the best work you've ever done. You enter into these trance states. That so much of narcissism, of who we are, of what our identity is, really just comes down to where we place this assemblage point, where we place our collector. Twins are the perfect example of that. You know, you've got genetic identical twins that can still have a difference. There's still a different focus, a different archon possession from each one of them because of this subtle change in their parabola, basically.
Mm. The no contact letter that you mentioned, that one of your friends wrote, was that a letter to inform somebody of no contact?
That would be called the superficial gift wrap of the letter. The gift wrap was, this is no contact. The deeper contents of the letter were I wanted her to understand that she opened the door for this vampire to come in. And by opening the door for the vampire to come in, it becomes your responsibility and obligation to ask the vampire to leave. You have to withdraw your consent that you gave. If you don't withdraw your consent formally, you are lying to yourself. Your ego doesn't know that you really mean that. Your egoic field didn't hear you say that. So much of what life is what we utter. We utter things and then they occur. So her letter was meant to, yes, it was no contact, but her letter was more about, these are my boundaries, and you were no longer inside them anymore. She had to say that because she had allowed him inside of her boundaries a few days prior. And it would be her playing a game with him to simply just stop, or at least that's the way we felt about it. was that just to stop and not say anything, which is, you know, a quick way to no contact, really doesn't allow her egoic field to say, this is over. Like, she's not telling him it's over. She's telling herself, this is over. And she's doing that through the very fetish that she was obsessed with or possessed with to begin with. So it's more of an act of empowerment, although it does go against no contact, that first letter. But that was the whole idea. And that was why some of the language I had said, maybe take this sentence out. Why are you giving him this sentence? Like, why are you even telling him what you think he did was wrong? You're not involved in his moral choices anymore. You're not a part of his wagon about where he should park his car anymore. Like, that's to linger. That's to stay. That's to say, yeah, I'm on your moral jury. You're no contact means you're not on their jury. No contact means you're not in a position of judgment at all. Apathy is the opposite of love, not hatred. It's important that people remember that.
Many people just enforce no contact without saying anything, and I understand why. And I think they do not feel the obligation that they have to inform their narc about it. And because, you know, how things work, the narc might use it to sneak in again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, they definitely will. They definitely will. Like that, it's not going to not happen. It definitely will. And above anything else, what I preach is sovereignty. That's why I usually don't give advice on it, because people need to find their sovereignty. And if you're going to look to me for advice, you don't have sovereignty. All you've done is said, I reject this master. Hey, master, how do you think I should reject this other master? Like, it's not really the same thing. It doesn't mean we should never ask for advice. You know, again, this is shades of gray here. Nor would I ever say universal, yeah, no contact involves you writing a letter. It's actually the opposite. I would say most of the time it doesn't. However, in this case, due to some circumstances, which they're superficial. I'm just not going to bring them up because I don't want to expose this person. But the circumstances just dictated, or seem to dictate, this would be a good opportunity to write a letter and initiate no contact. But the letter isn't even like a jab. It's not even like, most will do that. They will say, I am invoking no contact on you. And it's like, that's not no contact. That's literally serenading someone, you know, from their porch to say, I no contact you, you know. It's that doesn't work at all. But the empath has to understand their addiction. And until that person feels shame, I'm sorry, but it's just the case. Until you feel shame as an empath, as a codependent, you really haven't gotten out of that narc relationship. That core shame is the tears that make you feel better. You know, it's the crying that is so important, because the right kind of crying. I'm not talking about the sadness. I'm talking about the core shame that you feel about what you did to yourself. That is you coming home. That is you coming back home and saying, oh my gosh, I had no idea this closet was here. I had no idea that I have a whole bathroom down here that I've been neglecting this whole time. It's a coming home, and that should cause shame. If it does cause shame, it means you're in a really good position to heal, to really come back from that, because you feel the shame of what it was like to disrespect yourself so badly. You know, it's no different than doing something you shouldn't have done with someone sexually. Like, that's like the closest example I can think of. I've had that happen too, where it's just like, that really just shouldn't have happened. And it's, you want to carry that shame. You want to spend the rest of your life feeling that, why? Because that's always, that proves that your Great Wall of China is there and is freaking strong. Like, it proves that it's up. And that's really what makes us who we are, is our boundaries, doesn't it? Like, if we didn't have boundaries, we really wouldn't become people, because a boundary is just another prejudice. They attack the word prejudice to make us feel bad. But if you really look at the essence of what prejudice is Prejudice is the living embodiment of I am, because I am is nothing more than a collection of our choices that we make through life. And these choices are our prejudice. We find ourselves, we divine who we are through our prejudice. Allowing our prejudice to enact itself and unfold through space and time is how we figure out who we are. It's important that we respect and love our prejudice instead of shame it and treat it like a racist, xenophobic, sexist, nationalistic evil that we try and call it that. It's the exact opposite. It's the embodiment of who we are. It makes us Judith, makes us James. It's so important.
Many therapists, they follow a list of traits, symptoms that you have to display in order for them to diagnose somebody as being a narcissist. So, and I get that. That is not a diagnosis that you should throw around just randomly. But on the personal level, we know not all narcs check all boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are those that might love bomb you in the very beginning, and then there are others that don't do that. So would you, let's say you have 10 boxes and somebody displays 2 or 3, would you stay until they display all of them? Would you stay for the aftermath, or would you say, no thanks, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, I'm out of here?
I judge my relationships now by how I feel internally.
Okay.
Not by their own behavior. Because I have a relationship with one of my good friends, is like 24, 28 years old. And he grew up in a really like a bad home. He was adopted. Was a lot of drug use by his mom. And he has some, I'm sorry, I don't know the right words to say nowadays, but he has some mental challenges. He's mentally challenged, and he's in his 20s. He says some of the most vulgar things I've ever heard. But I still really consider him a valuable relationship that I have. I feel like that we help each other, enjoy life, find ourselves, whatever you want to call it. If I was to judge everyone by the same behavior, he would have to be held responsible for more of what he says. But I don't do that to him. Instead, I go by am I feeling healthy and fulfilled with this relationship? Or am I feeling constructive? Am I feeling destructive? This is the true art of zeticism. It's basing your truth off what you can directly experience. I can't directly experience what his motives are, or whether or not he fits into a DSM-5 box for narcissism. But I can fully monitor my prana economy with him. What is happening energetically? Do I feel obligated? And he tries to manipulate me all the time, out of money, out of favors. He's tried to get me to score drugs for him. He's tried to get me to try and get him laid. He is a very manipulative individual. But when I look at him, I enjoy him as a person because he's so obvious about it. It's what I see is the exact same car that's riding down the road every day, but it has no fender, it has no hood, it has no outer shell. I'm looking at the raw chemical engine of who we all are as real people, that all of us are doing that all the time, and that he just has no chemical governor, which is going to hide what that engine truly looks like to try and get me to accept him as a fellow driver. So I've noticed that if instead of me looking at his car, I look at what is my air filter system doing as a result of riding with him? What does my view look like? What part of town am I in? All of those things are much better indications of, is this a good or bad relationship? So I'm not even judging who's a narcissist anymore. I do see people, though, that are trapped in the vortex of pain. And I do respond to that pain a lot more. I literally have a lot of instances where I find someone that's in a state, and if I egg that state and try and point that out, it leads to this kind of awareness moment. And sometimes people like break down and just start crying because of what I've said to them. Not like in a, I'm hurting your feelings way, but if just in a, hey, I've noticed this, I've noticed this, I've noticed that. I've had a lot more luck dealing with the mental health of narcissists or empaths by looking specifically just at that what is their gait like? What is their posture like? What could they be affected from versus what label can we use to describe them? Because when someone calls me narcissist, I just tend to look at that constructively and go, okay, how am I displaying narcissism? And what is my prana economy with this person? What do they want to see a narcissist? Because sometimes that's exactly what's happening. Other times, I might find myself being predatorily there energetically. It's if we don't look at ourselves and really try and analyze what we're capable of, we're never going to not be a narcissist. The opposite of narcissist is someone who's constantly stalking their behavior. But you can't live where you're constantly stalking your behavior. Sometimes you just have to be in the trance of the moment and just be who you are. And I think most of the time, if you spend all of your time monitoring your activities at the gate to make sure it's not going to be perceived in a narcissistic way or whatever, you're pouring tons of energy out the window because you're having to dump it into that guardhouse to make sure that all your energy that comes out is squeaky clean. And even then, it will only be superficially squeaky clean, where it just looks like it's been cleaned. But actually underneath it is a much deeper economy that's even more sinister. So the more I look at how I could be perceived as narcissistic, the more sinister I'm becoming by trying to avoid looking that way. So when I come back to just how I feel, how does this relationship feel? Does it feel I am gaining a lot out of this person? This happens a lot as being a new author. When someone sends me a gift, I spend a lot of time analyzing that, really looking at how does that energy feel? How does that, is that fair? Am I setting up a dynamic that's unhealthy for me or for them? Is it in both ways? Because I might feel obligated then to someone too. So it's the only measure that I have, the only divining rod that I have really is my endocrine system. How does this relationship completely make me feel on all levels? How's my sovereignty? Is my self-worth too elevated? Is it too taxed? Am I the same person around this person as if when I'm alone? That's the biggie. It's the idea of, can you be in the room with a rock star or with an average person and be the same person? If you could be the same person with both of those, I would say you're truly not narcissistic. Otherwise, I think that you're always going to see some evidence of some predatory action there, which will show itself by when the rock star comes in versus when the homeless guy comes in. You're going to see some of those predatory instincts that are naturally within all of us start to come to the surface. And that's really when you can do the best work on yourself, is look for those opportunities where shame is such a powerful magnifying glass. If you find yourself feeling shame about something you did, man, that's a gift. Take that home and put it on the table, set a nice, perfect night for it, brew some coffee and unwrap that thing and really look at its anatomy. And you'll figure out, why do I feel shame about Bob? What is it about Bob that causes shame in me? And you can really start to unpick that relationship. Jealousy is the perfect example of this. When I feel jealousy, I know automatically I have a leak in my pressure system. My fuel system is a pressurized system, and I have a leak. When I feel jealous, I have a leak, and I am able to use this person, or the way I feel about this person, the jealousy that I feel, to diagnose exactly where my leak is. So if my leak is from my brother, that might tell me one thing. But if my leak is from my wife, that might tell me another thing, versus if it's my coworker. All of these are going to be diagnostic tools that we can use to fix our own leaks. And when we have no leaks, it's impossible to be a narcissist because it's simply not profitable. We're not in that fight-flight response where we'll take any duct tape we can to cover the hose just so we can make it to the next gas station. Because that's really what narcissism is. You're driving around on empty, and people are yelling at you, "Hey man, slow down. Why don't you pull over for a while and idle your car and think about why you're rushing through the city?" And the whole time you're the narcissist going, "I just need to get to the gas station." But everyone else is like, "You need to slow your roll." But if you slow your roll, you're going to run out of gas. That's why you're so desperate. If anything, it should be the opposite. When we see a narcissist, we should really love bomb them, but from a genuine, true way. Only then would they start to feel the shame of, wow, I'm kind of out here like,
I don't believe that.
Give me some
That they
change.
would feel shame. And I also deeply believe that they are not capable of love. They don't even have a concept what that is. They need to feed. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think someone who's bleeding has the concept of feeling love, because right now they're bleeding.
Yeah,
because they're
okay.
bleeding. Now, once the bleeding stops, all the higher systems are gonna kick back in again. We're a human endocrine system. You're not going to change the adrenals that are in your system. You're not going to be able to change that. Now, you could certainly chemically be tuned to have a fetish for pain. Sadism and masochism is an emotional fetish also. We develop these things emotionally. And so, you'll find some of the situations that you're talking about. But again, if that bleeding stops, this no longer becomes a prana economy that's worth it. Because the narcissist is able to see this is not, the love bombing is not worth it in the long run, because I have to keep a multi-tiered timeline of all my lies with everyone. And that really does burn a shitload of calories. But when we shut down the rest of our system, we can afford to have that. But when we wake up the endocrine system and we become healthy again, we've stopped the bleeding, we've returned pressure to a normal pressurized system, the narcissist is able to devote that many calories to all the lying and timeline switches. It's just not in the equation of what's normal or healthy. Narcissism is a trance state, in my opinion. It's a possession. It's not a person. A person isn't born a narcissist, nor are they made a narcissist and forever they are a narcissist. I don't think that's possible. I think any narcissist has as deep of a potential to overcome that as they did to fall into that. Certainly, we're going to find some exceptions, absolutely, where you're dealing with psychopathy, but we're also going to find exceptions where you're dealing with a pure telepath. Narcissism does have that vanishing point, which, okay, so I've been ignoring this. I have to give you this. This is a biggie. There's definitely a vanishing point for narcissism where it's no longer profitable to look back to self-reflect on your own behavior. That's where the malignant narcissism probably kicks in, is once you enter that threshold, the profit and loss statement is no longer ever going to be viable to come back from that. In which case, in those situations, the only thing that could take you back is a very deep trauma. Some sort of really large trauma could take you back from that. But how do you self-induce those kind of traumas? You can't. In fact, if you could self-induce it, it wouldn't be enough of a trauma to make you overcome that. It would have to be a involuntary trauma. And that's when we're really literally talking about violence at this point. I mean, I'm not saying that, you have to punch a narcissist, but what I mean is that you really are, to help someone like that, you really would technically be committing a form of violence in order to bring the endocrine system back from that. That's why I say Satanists, satanic ritual abuse survivors, which are more than we want to admit, because no one has to be in a red robe. No one has to have a devil's tongue to abuse you satanically. Satanic ritual abuse literally means satanic, vacuous, ritual all the time abuse. So it's a self-abandoned abuse that's happening over and over again. For someone to heal or come back from that as a survivor, their endocrine system, their dilation inside of their chemicals would have to be heightened to the same degree as when they were being traumatized. And the only way to heighten someone is to repeat that trauma in a different way that has the same effect. And that's what I mean by we're really talking about violence. Like you would, because it would have to be involuntary, or else they would never feel, you could never turn that dial back up to 11 long enough to heal them without you violating their rights, without you doing something involuntarily to them. And that's why I say, you know, true satanic ritual abuse, you really can't heal from that. You're always going to be a tree that's split. So I guess you could say I'm sort of contradicting myself in a way, because I'm saying on one hand, you're not going to come back from that. But narcissism itself, though, I really do think it's a trance. It's a possession. It's not a person. And so if you can step out of that trance, you truly could technically recover. But recovery isn't even the right word. It's more about just evolve and transform from that and fill yourself up back into your mammalian system, which is, you know, where empathy reigns.
Yeah, even therapists are very split over this. There are those that say, yes, they can heal. And there are those that categorically say, no way to heal them.
Yeah. And I can see and have read the arguments on both sides and why it's explained the way it is. Sadly, I don't see enough of people confirming it as a possession, confirming it as a, like you said, Archon, same language, it really fits here, as a software program that has been installed in us and can be uninstalled too. But that's where sovereignty comes in. And typically when you go to see a therapist, you are entering into a master-slave relationship, which is literally the opposite of sovereignty, which is why most people are not going to get help in therapy, especially not on a couch. You could get, like in the wilderness camp, I used to work in a wilderness camp where it was 24/7, you were in the woods, kind of therapy programs. And those therapy programs, I think, are really viable. In fact, if I had enough money, I would have one now. I would start my own campground and do this, because I really believe in that kind of magic. When you're outside in a wilderness camp, you are constantly being exposed to discomfort that is not caused by another human. And when it's not caused by another human, it's a really valuable trauma I was just talking about. You would need to elevate their trauma to that same degree. If you can turn that trauma back up to level 9, which is where it was when they turned narcissist, you now have the potential and the power to heal that, to resolve that situation. You're returning to the scene of the crime from a dilationary chemical standpoint. Chemically, you're back in the same endocrine state you were in last time, only now you can resolve the adrenaline. Most of us, when we feel fear, don't understand that we're feeling adrenaline. And adrenaline is our body bequeathing power to us. When you feel that adrenaline feeling and you get scared, it's literally your body saying, I believe in you so much, I'm giving you all these chemicals to back you up. It believes in the strength that it's given you. But if your psyche is an empath or is a scapegoat is there, you're going to believe you're not worthy of that power. And when you're not worthy of it, you're going to abandon it. And that's going to stick with you for the rest of your life until you're back in that same situation again and you can reclaim it in a redo. Or, you know, this is really the hero's journey, the art of the redo, or the retribution, the return kind of thing.
So we are stuck in a self-sabotage behavior.
Yeah, I would say almost all of what we go through destiny-wise is self-sabotage. That's what the sovereign man would say. That's what a person who wants to empower himself the most would have to say that, would have to understand that's what this is all about.
James, that was great. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad this is a good topic.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to getting other people's feedback on this.
Yeah, it's timely, and it was about time that we talked about it. And especially since you have personal experience, you wrote about it and so on and so forth. So I knew that you would be the perfect guest for this.
Yep, I studied the somatic therapy methods and the clinical therapy methods, and just the whole heart of psychopathy and narcissism in general, multiple personalities, and now demon possession. I've looked at this same issue from all these different angles, and that's why I feel confident in saying this is a vortex. This is an energy black hole inside our solar plexus. It's installed inside our solar plexus, and that's why it's so potent and why it lasts so long.
Yeah. And I think that black hole cannot be filled just like that.
It's going to require a ritual where you match the same endocrine levels that were there when you lost it. And that could be as easy as jumping out of a plane. Really, like there would be a therapeutic method to jumping out of a plane. You're charging a sigil in that way. It would be as easy as having a realization about self-abandonment, about Googling what are the traits of self-abandonment and just reading those. And it could be that easy too. Realization is a form of Zen. It's a form of dilation too. You can realize something and your pores open instantly. It causes that same alignment. Weirder things have happened for sure.
That's true. Weirder things have happened. Yeah.
Yep. For what it's worth, my book Blueprints of Mind Control talks about the ego. It talks about the power of the ego. It talks about how we shame the ego and why shaming the ego causes more narcissism. I wish more people talked about that and wrote about that. To me, that's one of the most important things that we can read today. Again, if I had this campground, it would be like this anti-college, this place where you would go to unlearn all the crap that we've been taught. And one of the first lessons would definitely be about the ego, what it truly is, and just how valuable and important it is to your identity, to your sense of prejudice, to the power that you get from that. So if anyone wants to read more about that, Blueprints of Mind Control has a couple of chapters. One that just all it does is analyze the ego. It really does break down a lot of the bullshit that we've been told for a long time.
Yeah, that's true. We need the ego to navigate here. James, are you still here? Oh, you were frozen.
Oh, I see. No, I'm still here. I didn't say anything. I was beholding the silence while the internet was frozen.
The power of silence.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So, okay. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we will have you back.
I look forward to it. It's always a pleasure, Judith. I enjoy our conversations very much.
Yeah, me too. So guys, this was it. Night Flight for today. Take good care of yourself and stay safe and sound. Bye-bye.